Good morning to those who are just joining us now. We're just going to give it a couple more seconds and we'll begin shortly. Okay, let's get started. Thank you for joining today's webinar, SOC and SIEM, why protection is no longer enough. In today's session, we're going to talk about what a modern SOC SIEM solution looks like and show you how a ransomware attack can be mitigated with a red team versus blue team response. But before we jump into today's presentation, I hand you over to our speakers, I do have a little bit of housekeeping to run you through. So if you go to the next slide. Thank you. So firstly, feel free to screenshot any of the slides you think are relevant throughout today's webinar. But that being said, we will be recording and I will be sending out a link to the webinar tomorrow morning. So keep an eye out for that. Onto the team. I'm Paige. I'm the marketing manager in the UK. With me today, I have Paul Hogan, Chief Strategy and Innovation Officer, and Brendan Fay, Chief Operating Officer. Both are joining us from Ward Solutions, which is an Echo company. And finally, we invite your comments and questions throughout the webinar. So if you do have any questions, just pop them into the chat box on your screen and we'll get to them at the end of the webinar. There'll also be a few polls throughout, so make sure you leave us your response to those, and there'll also be a short survey at the end, so do leave us your feedback. So before I hand you over to Paul to kick us off then, I'm actually going to begin with a poll, and you should see that come up on your screen now. So the first question then is, do you believe your current investments in cybersecurity can protect you from the latest advanced threats? I'll give you a few seconds to answer that. Numbers jumping up. So far, it's kind of even. So we've got yes, 41%, no, 59% so far. And I think that's everyone. So interesting results there, Paul. I'll hand over to you.
Yeah, thanks for that, Paige. Yeah, interesting result. And in some ways it plays out, well, it doesn't really play out what we see in the marketplace. Look, welcome everyone today to this webinar on not only protecting from, but being able to detect and respond to cyber attacks that are out there. What we're going to have a look at is first of all, I suppose some of the challenges that are in the market, challenges that you face and that all organizations face. Then we're going to kind of take a step through what an attack looks like, and Brendan Fay is going to show you the various stages that attackers would take as they try and gain initial access through to performing malicious and nefarious activities in your environment. And briefly have a look at how you defend against those. And as we said, pretty much 50% of you think you're doing a good job at that right now. That's very interesting. But also, if those defenses don't work out, we'll have a look at what can you do beyond that. And that's the detect and respond piece, and where that kind of where that fits in. Maybe we take a step back, and everyone would have, I suppose, remembered the HSE attack, which was the largest, I suppose, cyber attack in Ireland ever, and the consequences were far-reaching, not just for HSE, but for the public at large. And if you think of an organization like the HSE, or any organization that we've seen that have been subject to cyber attacks, what they would all have in common is that they would have invested in protection mechanisms, things like endpoint protection and firewalling. They might have web app filtering, email filtering, etc. And pretty much when any of these organizations, even though that's in place, attackers have managed to compromise the organization and done serious action. And so the whole premise today is that although you might have your protection mechanisms in place, sometimes they're not enough. And it's kind of incumbent that you must be able to, I suppose, detect what's happening and also respond to what's happening in real time. The poll was quite interesting. One thing that we've seen, and some kind of brief market stats, I won't labor this, is attacks can happen every 40 seconds in not just the Irish context, but I more general context. And it's anticipated that 1 in 5 SMEs will be subject to a cyber attack or cyber breach this year. And Echo earlier on in the year did an infrastructure modernization report, and some of the stats that popped out from that were quite interesting too, in terms of if there is an incident or activity that needs a response, that only 38% of organizations feel they can respond to it. And 1 in 4, I suppose, C-level leaders in organizations feel that they have control over what's happening. So a lot of industries, a lot of organizations don't really believe that they have the ability to respond to threats that are happening. And that kind of bears out in some of what we're seeing. So why is this? Like, why are we in a position like this? So first of all, we think of I suppose the kind of challenges that are facing organizations out there today. The first is that the landscape has got increasingly more complex, and it's got complex in a number of different ways. Vulnerabilities previously that were difficult to exploit are now much more easily exploitable, and exploitable by, traditionally we would have seen things like script kiddies being able to use these vulnerabilities and not do a whole lot of damage. Whereas nowadays, the weaponization of some of these vulnerabilities means that pretty much anyone has the ability to launch something like a ransomware attack if they want to do so. We're also seeing kind of ransomware affiliations where you can sign up with a ransomware group, effectively get trained by them, get to use their tools. Again, if you're someone that has a minimal amount of knowledge or a medium amount of knowledge in cybersecurity, you can use these tools, and then you can conduct attacks using those tools, and then you give a kickback or a certain percentage back to the cyber attackers. So you can see all of this is making it much more easier for people to be able to weaponize vulnerabilities and use them against you. The other thing, and particularly in relation to ransomware attacks, is where previously there would have been things like drive-by attacks, or a piece of malware might run. Now we're seeing an awful lot more of what has been coined as human-based ransomware attacks. So it's not just the technologies that are attacking you; it's people on the far end too, who they'll try one kind of exploit, they'll try one way in, and they'll try to use various tools to get privilege escalation, whatever they're trying to do. And really, the kind of key thing is you're now not just facing a piece of software; you're facing a human with a piece of software who's going to try and spend that time to get in and see what's happening and see how they can further exploit your company. When you look at what's called the dwell time, which is the amount of time an attacker gets an initial foothold to maybe launching an attack, it can be anything from 8 or 9 days up to 3 or 4 months. So even though you might have the protection mechanisms in place, what we've witnessed is that attackers have been able to get access and even work very, very slowly and very, very methodically behind the scenes as they try and compromise an organization. So it's key. It's absolutely critical. 100% protection is just not realistically achievable, and that's something that people have to understand and accept. I mean, if you look at Ward Solutions, we've built this in even to our logo. It's assess, protect, detect, and respond. So cybersecurity doesn't stop with understanding what your environment is like or what the threats are like and putting in those protection controls and mechanisms. You must be able to detect what's kind of happening behind the scenes, and small little indicators, and stop those before they become something larger. Of course, it's not helped by the fact that the IT landscape has got increasingly more complex. Even since like COVID-19, we're all kind of working remotely, and that has meant huge changes to organizations as they struggle to deliver that and a new way of working. The move to cloud has been something that through business transformation initiatives, lots of organizations have looked to do. Hybrid cloud at one stage was a step on the journey. Now for a lot of people, hybrid cloud is the endpoint in the journey, and multi-cloud is the endpoint in the journey. So you have on-premise, you have remote workers, you have private cloud, you have public cloud, and you have that hybrid deployment. So as you can see, the kind of attack surface area that attackers have has widened. No longer can you think of I can put a firewall up or a set of controls and lock everything behind it. Effectively, your controls need to be based pretty much everywhere you have data in the organization. So complex IT environments certainly have made it more difficult to protect against. And I suppose the last driver, and normally we wouldn't push the compliance drivers, but every so often a compliance driver comes along, which we all have to sit sit up and take notice. The GDPR certainly was one. But right now, what you might be seeing, if you're looking for things like cyber insurance, is and depending on the insurer you go with, there is a lot of push towards, if you want cyber insurance with us, you need to be able to show that you have a log management solution or an ability to detect and respond what's happening in your organization. So that's a kind of compliance mandate if you want to be able to get that cyber insurance. And I suppose it's a reflection of their acknowledgement or knowledge or know-how that yes, you need to be able to detect what's happening as well as put those protective mechanisms in place. So what Todd will do now is just to kind of air the conversation a little bit is step through a kind of a cyber attack, and the various different stages that are in it. It's kind of made, and Brendan's going to go through it now. It's kind of made up of some of the activities that we would have seen through various different attacks, whether they were ones like Conti and some of the tools and techniques they would have used, or other attackers. And so this is kind of like the red team view or the attacker's view of what an attacker's trying to do. So what I'll do is I'll hand it over to Brendan now to just to step through this attack.
Thanks, Paul. Yep, from our perspective, it really does help to understand how to defend if you understand how these attacks actually work. So we'll go through a few examples of where we have been involved in incidents and ransomware incidents, and how the attacker got in from examination afterwards, and the procedures they use throughout. So they do follow. So the MITRE attack framework goes through the tactics, the techniques, the procedures that an attacker uses to gain the initial access, then to do the lateral movement, privilege escalation, and so forth. So it's a reference point, and it's good to understand the tools that they use so that we can properly defend against them. Another one is the Lockheed Martin, which very similar to MITRE. It represents items as a chain of events: the recon, the weaponization, they deliver, they exploit, so forth. And you're trying to break that chain or trying to slow them down. So it's good to understand what they do in order to defend. So what would typically happen, what we would see in most of the initial access where they gain access will come in through a phishing email. And that could be very targeted. So they may do some recon on, if they're very specifically targeting your organization, they'll do recon on people within that organization, be it LinkedIn, Facebook, or whatever. And they'll send a phishing email, and they will develop a weapon. They will try to understand what types of controls you have in place. Is it what type of endpoint controls you have in place? So they try and develop a weapon that'll get around those controls. That's if it's a very targeting phishing email. Another type of email that comes in, it's probably more common, would be where they have compromised a colleague of yours, compromised their email, and they go through all of their contacts, and they will send all of your colleagues' contacts an email saying, here's the invoice, or here's the contract you looked for. That would be the most common one. And in there, it may have an attachment associated with it, or it may be links to another site. Typically, it's actually links to another site. And what we find is they don't want to put in the attachment, because the attachment would typically be stripped out at your mail gateway, or the macros may be removed, or it may discover what the problem is. So they don't want to send it as an attachment. They send it in as a URL. They can also obfuscate the URL, so your click-through protection, if you do have click-through protection, that it tries to bypass that click-through protection, that it doesn't actually represent it as a URL. It might be a link like www.testsite.com/ your documents, or something to that effect, and it's not clickable. So your click-through protection doesn't work. So people may actually get that link, copy it, and paste it into the browser. That's what they're looking for them to do. Or sometimes it is a click-through link. So that link then may bring you to a site that they're saying, here's your invoice that you asked for, or here's the contract you asked for. That site would typically have one of three mechanisms that they typically do. Would be a macro, say, within a Word document, and they're standard. As Paul said, there's tools for developing Squirrel Waffle would be one of those. And when you open up the Word document, it may say, this document is signed, you need to enable macros in order to view the document. And people do enable macros. And next of all, it executes something on your machine. It's all about getting you to do something, to run some command. So that would maybe a macro in a Word document. Another way that we see it is an Excel file, and it may have active content hidden in a particular cell or something like that, and you enable the active content. Another one that we see is that the URL may bring you, and it looks like a PDF, but it's actually an executable, and you run the executable, and then it starts the PDF afterwards. And people click on that. Typically, all of these would generate alerts to the end user, the UAC alerts that they have to accept. But unfortunately, users typically do accept it as well. So what we're trying to get, there can be 0 days in these documents, but typically not. Typically, it's in the macro or active content or disguise. That it's just to get somebody to run an executable. Other types of infections wouldn't be this, that it may come in if you have RDP open to the internet or an Exchange vulnerability or Log4j, or they have been weaponized as well. But this would be the most common way of getting in. Also, the link that it's going to, typically it wouldn't be in the country. So one, say, got through our own defenses because, as I say, the initial email gets in, and you're relying on the users, the end user, not to do something silly of opening a document and ignoring the UAC alerts. But say the link in this particular site went off to a site in Indonesia, as an example. So if you don't need to be talking to Indonesia, then that would be a way of that you do GeoIP protections to stop people clicking on sites that are in countries that you're not dealing with, as an example. Also, that particular site wouldn't be known in your FortiGate or in your whatever it may be that you're using. That it would typically be a site that has not yet been indicated is a phishing site, because they have an awful lot of resources. So it would go under the radar. It would get through your defenses, perhaps, and people then click on the link and they run the UAC. So then that would allow the attacker to run something on the end user. That's what we're all about as the first stage. Maybe if you can go on to the next stage, please, Paul. Yeah, so now that we've run something, whether it be a macro in a Word document or active content in an Excel or just run an executable, we want to escalate our privileges, and we want to remain in control on that device. So typically, we would do a multi-stage attack. So what we'd run is we'd run something that does a DNS lookup and then a HTTP out to a command and control. The command and control is a server that's in the control of the attacker. So we run something on your endpoint, and it establishes a command and control session out to our command and control server. Again, similarly, the command and control server would be something new that we've set up. We'd be setting them up quite frequently so that they're not automatically put into known command and control servers. Because there's lists, say, on your FortiGate or on different systems, whatever type of firewall you may have, or whatever type of controls to prevent people browsing to known sites, to known command and control. So on that channel that it goes over can be just DNS, if it's only DNS, or it can be over HTTP as well, HTTPS. And it would be to a valid domain. It might look like shopping.com or abc.shopping.com. So from your own perspective, it would be just seen as regular HTTP traffic. But now that we have a foothold on one endpoint, basically, and we have a command and control, and we've gone under the radar, we're trying to be as stealthy as we possibly can. Then we move on to the next stage. On our next stage, what we're all about is we're trying to get access to your domain. We're trying to get a domain admin, essentially. So how do we do it? We would use standard, and we're trying to remain as stealthy as we possibly can so we don't be detected. So the initial infection, the initial access, and the initial command and control might be immediate, or it might be a multi-stage attack that goes on over a week that we don't do it because we want to remain in control. This stage here could last, the privilege escalation and lateral movement stage could last from a day to a number of weeks. What we'd start off, our end game is to get domain admin. So we would first of all, the endpoint that we've got control over, we would see who are we running as, what groups do we have access to, what shares do we have access to, what users are in the domain admin group, who has domain access. And we would use techniques, say the likes of Mimikatz, which we've installed an agent on this endpoint, and that agent has different tools within it. So maybe Cobalt Strike, or it would be a very typical one, and it can dump. It has Mimikatz built into it, so it can dump if somebody has logged into that laptop in the past. We can get their password from Mimikatz, from memory, effectively. Alternatively, if we can also get the password hashes that are on for all local users that are on that endpoint, that are on that laptop. And say you have a local user called administrator, a local administrative user, and their password is something really complex, which is great. But if you have the same local administrator on another laptop with the same password, we don't actually need a password. We can just use pass the hash techniques, and we can move over to this other laptop and run commands on the other laptop as that local admin. So we get our local admin, we find out who is logged into this laptop, and then we move to another laptop, say, or it might be a server, using pass the hash or using other mechanisms. We could use Mimikatz, or we could take the NTLM hashes offline, and we could try and brute force them offline. We could do pass the hash. Worst case scenario, we would do an exploit, say on a print spooler or something like that, but we want to stay stealthy. So we would use standard living off the land, as it's called, tools, ARP, as you say, your PS exec, or what shares you have, what users you have, user admin. So we have now got access to, say, 2 laptops, and we would establish our command and control to both laptops, just in case we're copped on the first laptop, that we have multiple commands and control. So we have multiple ways into your environment. When we're on the second laptop, we found out who was logged into that laptop, and we get the passwords associated with those users. And then we may move to another laptop, or we may move to a server and get the passwords of users that have logged into those systems. And again, we're looking for a user that has domain admin rights. So typically, if we make it onto, say, be a file share or onto an Active Directory server, using the likes of Mimikatz or memory forensics, an administrator will have logged into that server at some stage. So we will get the administrator password. It may take us a while, but now we're in as domain admin, and that is our target. And typically, once you get past the first 2 stages, you will, and if you're not detected, you will eventually get access to your domain admin. So now we have our domain admin access. So our next stage then, our privilege account has been compromised. We can go on to the next stage. So we're now in, what we want to do is discover some information on your environment. Where's your crown jewels? What's really important to you? So backups would be one thing that we'd be going after. We would be trying to disable your backups or render them useless if we can. We would also go after, where's your sensitive data? So customer data or finance data. And we take a load of that data offline, because we're going to use that as part of the ransom. It's not just that everything's encrypted. We have also got all of your customer data, and we will publish it on the web if you don't pay us our ransom, as an example. So that stage can also take a week or 2, or it may take a few hours, depending on how difficult it is to get through the different controls. But we'd be copying large amounts of data. And all of this, again, we would try to be doing it as stealthy as we can. But if we have controls, these are things that we can detect as well. But so now we've gone after your backups, we've taken a copy of your data, and we may have been in there now for 4 weeks at this stage, as an example. And then if we go on to the next stage, please, Paul. So then at the very end, we have your data, we have full control over the environment, and we would do a coordinated launch of the ransomware, typically late at night, because it takes a few hours for it to roll out to all. We decide what to roll it out to, whether it be to all desktops or all servers or absolutely everything. And I'd say we typically do it on Thursday night or Friday night, or sorry, not we do it. This is where we have been involved where we have been involved in incidents. it's typically like the HSE was very early on a Friday morning that everybody detected at 6 o'clock or so on Friday morning when all hell broke loose. And I've also been called at 3 o'clock in the morning on typically again on a Friday morning, or it might be on a bank holiday weekend, or when people aren't around, when people aren't monitoring it. So it takes a while for you to detect that all your servers are slowly going down one by one as they're all being encrypted. But our malware is now deployed. We've issued a ransomware note. We've told you that everything's encrypted, and unless you pay the ransom, we will publish it. Don't try and recover yourself, because otherwise we're going to publish this exfiltrated data as well that we've just gathered. So typically you come in the next morning, or you get a call at 3 o'clock in the morning that everything has gone down and the ransomware. Well, that's where all the stress starts of trying to decide what to do next. Is there any questions on that? It's good to understand what a real attack in order to understand how best to defend. That's why we're explaining this.
That's great, Brendan. Thanks a million for that. I think, you know, if you look back through that, you can see, you know, it's complex. The tools, the techniques that attackers have are very rigorous. And just one thing, if you look at the, you know, the first couple of stages are pretty much common to any kind of attack. And I know we've said ransomware attack here, but the last piece, like exfiltration and impact, that can be different. So for example, an impact rather than malware deployed could be, I'll disable all your client facing servers and cause you some you know, some reputational damage. Or exfiltration could be say you have a person leaving your organization, they don't want to leave with a lot of intellectual property. Exfiltration could be that. So I think what's key, just I suppose to take home here, is it's the impact doesn't just have to be ransomware. It can be any one of those typical either advanced external threats, attacks, or internal threats that you might be seeing. I think given that, it's probably worth asking. Maybe this is a little bit like the like the first question, but given the scenario that Brendan has painted there, how confident are you now, with your kind of, so I suppose, understanding of those attacker techniques, that your current controls and technologies can stop an attack like that from happening? We'll just give that a few minutes. And so by technologies, we mean things like endpoint protection, or your firewalls, your web filtering, etc. By controls, we mean things like how you go about your business. Do you have user awareness training? Do you have things like multi-factor authentication, etc. So the controls and technologies are the two approaches to putting a good defensive strategy.
Yeah, and just to add to that, even when the controls are really good, that you are dependent on the end user. The end user is your human firewall. It's the last line defense. That's you do have to have them paranoid about clicking links, or we are paranoid in Ward ourselves about clicking any links or copying a link and going to a website that you don't know.
Okay, looks like we've got majority results in. Can you guys see those results? It looks like 76% are somewhat confident, 4% very confident, 16% I don't know, and 4% not at all confident. What do you think of those results?
I think it's good. I mean, if people have that level of confidence, I think it's good. What we've seen, I suppose, in the marketplace is that hasn't always borne out to be true. But what it does say to us, I suppose, is that people have invested strongly in those controls and technologies to protect. It depends on your approach. Have you looked to protect everything from endpoint to cloud, or looked to maybe protect things like a different lens will be people, assets, intellectual property, etc. That's really reassuring in some ways to know. If we move on to look, what do those controls and technologies look like, and maybe for some of those people that might think they might have gaps, just kind of briefly, the blue team would be the defensive side, and let's look at some of, I suppose, the defensive actions. So in the first piece, we were talking about like phishing mails and URL protection, etc. You're looking at products like Defender for Office 365, or Proofpoint or Mimecast or 40mail, and there's a whole range of products there that'll help protect you at that level. And it's kind of key. Email, as Brendan said, is really really well exploited attack vector, and it's kind of key that you do have those controls in place or technologies in place. So that's one thing would make sure that you know to review and have in place. In terms of the endpoint, in order to stop some of these pieces from execution, these pieces of malware from execution, Defender for Endpoint is a product, Carbon Black Enterprise, Trellix, Silence, Semantic, etc. So you'll see there's lots of endpoint protection products that are out there, but also there you need, and we're going to show you in a second, the ability not just to protect, but be able to detect and respond what's happening. A lot of where we've seen with malware attacks and ransomware attacks is one of the things the attackers have been able to do is bypass that endpoint protection in a lot of cases. Or if endpoint protection is traditionally that very much traditional based endpoint protection based on signatures, that can also be bypassed. You know, Brendan did mention a lot of fileless attacks or in-memory attacks, and you know, at a minimum, you should be looking at a next generation antivirus or next generation anti-malware product to try and stop any kind of further exploits. In terms of identity, so the identity piece in the middle is difficult. It's certainly issue controls around Active Directory or the other directory sources. Multi-factor authentication absolutely everywhere, internal and external, if you can do it. In the Microsoft world, Defender for Identity is a very strong product that helps manage your identity security posture, and that applies, you know, not just for normal user accounts, but also for looking at like privileged accounts compromise, and maybe you're also looking at technology like privileged access management and tools in that area. So that in all the areas here is one that we see generally isn't dealt with as well as endpoint and network type security. But when you think that you know, compromising a user account is kind of key, it's one that you really should be aware of. And then in terms of if data has been exfiltrated, how do you detect that? In the Microsoft world, it's something like Defender for Cloud Apps. It can be another cloud access security broker type technology, whether that's again from Fortinet or from McAfee with SkyHigh and or Akamai. There are a number of products out there, and they're really good at showing you, here is the data that's leaving your organization. Here are the applications that are using it. Here's the amount of data, and then not just to measure it, but also to manage it, to say, actually, this user has been seen trying to exfiltrate a large amount of data at a time that doesn't look right, and then you alert on that. Or this user is trying to download data onto a personal device, and your corporate policy is not to allow that. So again, you need to have those controls and, first of all, those policies in place to help you do that and protect against that. Not only measure it, but also manage what's happening. And I suppose the last point, depending on what the attack looks like, if it's trying to stop a piece of malware running, it is that either an endpoint protection product or more likely an endpoint detect and respond product, which allows you to not only stop your typical file-based attacks, but also your fileless and your in-memory and those other kind of attacks. So tools like, as mentioned a second ago, you know, Defender for Endpoint, Carbon Black, Silence, Trellix, and a whole range of other ones will help you in that. But you need to move to that next generation antivirus and next generation EDR kind of technology. So where does that kind of put us to? Sorry, there's a little bit of overlap in those slides there. So these are kind of typical questions that you should be asking yourself, or maybe that your management are asking you. So what are kind of the risks and vulnerabilities that are out there? Are you configured and protected against them, and are you in compliance? And by compliance, we don't just mean like GDPR compliance, but say you have a standard Windows 10 build or standard Server 2016 build. Is every server in compliant with that? And in the world or echo world, that's all about assessment and protection. And I mentioned really at the start of that, that's the kind of the very basics. And looking at some of those poll answers, it looks like a lot of people have invested heavily and are very confident in their capabilities, I suppose, not just to assess what's out there, but more so to protect. But one thing we have seen with the various ransomware attacks and other malware attacks is that, you know, 100% protection is not realistically achievable. It's not achievable because of cost, because of complexity, for all those other challenges we would have been able to see. So if there is something happening, and these are the other kind of questions you need to happen, or need to be able to ask. So what are the incidents that are happening right now? If it's something like ransomware, and the first time you know about it is you see files being encrypted, that's way too late. What will have happened, and if you went back to Brendan's kill chain there, or the MITRE ATT&CK framework, there would have been activity at all those various stages. So there would have been opportunities at all those various stages to detect some nefarious activity and be able to stop it right now. So understanding what the incidents are, and then what's the impact and how do you respond to it is kind of key as well. And in our world, that's where we talk about detect and respond. So detection is what? It's all about detecting, I suppose, the vulnerabilities that are there, and that's probably more on the protect side, but also the incidents that are happening, or even the precursors to incidents that are happening. So for example, if you see something like 5 failed logons and 1 successful logon, if you're managing that, does that mean something? It could mean actually that is an attacker that's compromised an account, or it could be that always happens with Johnny on a Monday morning. He forgets his password, but he gets it right the 5th time because he's written down somewhere, whatever happens to be. So it's kind of key that you're able to be able to understand what's happening and make context and get the context from it to make good decisions. And then in terms of impact, so the respond piece is, if something is happening, are you able to respond? So for example, if a user did click on a malicious link and some malware was downloaded onto the machine, can you isolate and quarantine that machine? Are you confident that you can stop that software or malicious code from running, or that activity from happening? So being able to detect and respond, and in our case, respond at this stage is contain what the attack is and stop it going anywhere further. So those are the kind of questions, and the dark blue ones pretty much around your current controls and technologies, but those kind of purple ones are ones that are important to understand. So again, we have another kind of quick poll. So again, if an attacker bypasses your controls, and we've seen what they are, and what the attacker can do and what those controls are, how confident would you be that you could detect and respond to activity within the environment? So we'll just have a quick poll on that.
A few more coming in. Okay. So we'll share those results with you. 52% somewhat confident.
Okay, so it looks like the numbers previously we had about 70 to 80% were confident in the protection, and that number drops down to about 50 to 60% in terms of the ability to detect and respond. So that's kind of telling and matches really well what we see in the marketplace. So what is it, or what do you need to be able to do, or what does it look like to be able to detect and respond? So you'll come across lots of acronyms. So EDR, endpoint detect and respond; MDR, managed detect and respond; XDR, extended detect and respond. I think the key in all of this is that detect and respond piece. So it's not just identifying what's happening, but it's also the ability to respond and either mitigate any activity that might be happening. So how do we do this? Well, you're going to have your environment, and this is a slightly different view of that attack chain. So you're going to have people and identities. You're going to have infrastructure. Everything from network infrastructure, cloud infrastructure, firewalls, etc. You're going to have cloud environments. Again, IaaS, IaaS, SaaS, and PaaS environments. And then you're going to have endpoints where their servers or servers or endpoints or even mobile devices. So that's what your environment looks like. All of those components or all of those places in your environment are places where attackers might be able to exploit, say, a vulnerability in an endpoint, a vulnerability with a user who clicks a link they shouldn't have, a misconfigured cloud application that allows people in, or a misconfigured endpoint. So in terms of detecting and responding, the first thing that we need to be able to do is see what's happening on all of those. So taking data from those various sources and feeding into things like endpoint detect and respond platforms, into a SIEM platform, and enriching with threat intelligence. Again, this is very much the kind of technology view or technology answer to this, which is your managed detect and respond platforms. So SIEM, EDR, and embedded threat intelligence. And that allows us to build up a picture. And what the picture does and what these platforms then allow us to do is, based on what they might have seen, and part of this could be multi-stage. So they might have seen a user click on a link. That user clicking on the link was nothing strange. That link was a website. That's fine. People go to a website. That website opened a PDF document. That's fine. But that PDF document opened a piece of PowerShell. Now, some of those, PowerShell running on its own isn't nefarious. Website isn't, access isn't nefarious. Opening a PDF isn't. But the combination of all of those and taking data from all those various kind of locations and say this happens at 3 a.m. when we know that person doesn't work at that hours, the platform then is able to run a set of analytics to determine, when we've taken all that information in, we've seen that doesn't look right, and then that raises that or escalates this as an alert to a SOC. So the right-hand side, sorry, the left-hand side, as you can see there, is very much the technology. And then the SOC analyst will have a look at it and say, what does this mean? Is it a true positive? Or is it a false positive? Because sometimes, some of these activities may look nefarious, but they're not. It could be a benign positive. It could be, we've seen this activity, it looks nefarious, say a user was added to a domain admin group. Yes, but that's allowed in this particular case. So the SOC analysts are the people that can take those alerts and then determine, is it something that they need to action on? And effectively, what analysts are doing are trying to run use cases, and our use cases span, I suppose, two areas. Three areas. The first, instant response, is if there is an incident, how do we respond, and what does respond mean? So what needs to be done? The second, if you take the high level, attacks are either one of two things. They can be advanced external attacks, as Brendan has shown there, and affect, a lot of the kind of context we're going to get from that will be from the environment and things like web, mail gateways, email, firewalls, etc. Our internal attacks can also be very damaging. In this case, it's very much user behavior based on what the user is doing internally in the organization, because it might just be their it might just be that they're uploading a lot of data externally, or not, or whatever happens to be. So the insider threat is one that's kind of really key to be able to understand as well. So you can start with the use cases on the right hand side and how we would deploy this. We start with use cases, and then we'd say the use cases that are important to you. What are those kind of controls and technologies that support it, and what are the I suppose sources that we need to get data from. And then in terms of the service, what does this look like? So Echo as a SIEM and SOC as a service to deliver those managed detect and respond pieces. So what is it? First of all, it's managed detect and respond. We can base on just purely SIEM or on endpoint detect and respond. Ideally, what makes most sense is that EDR product with a SIEM to give you that full coverage, because an awful lot happens on the endpoint. In terms of the SIEM platform, we support too, IBM Curator or the Microsoft Sentinel platform, and there's pros and cons for both. And effectively, based on your environment, we would make a recommendation which one would suit you best. And a part of the service is, deploying it into your environment, coming up with the use cases, determining what are the rules to match those use cases, and what are the log sources to feed into those rules. And then our managed SOC or MDR service is doing that full 24/7 monitoring. And depending on the contract we might have in place, the response can be anything from notifying you of an incident with guided remediation advice, all the way to, if we're managing, say, your firewalls and your endpoints, making emergency change requests on your firewalls, or isolating endpoints, or making changes such as that, depending on the level of engagement and depth we have. Both platforms are very strong on UEBA. Effectively, UEBA is looking at user behavior. It's very much machine learning analytical based to see patterns of user behavior that are out of norm. It could be logging on at funny hours or funny hours. It could be things like impossible travel that you might see from your 365 combined with something else. So our SOC is 27001 certified. It's 24/7 based in Ireland, and it's manned by experienced SOC analysts. And the benefits, as you can see, are enhanced security. It's cost effective, delivered by experts. A challenge we see organizations trying to do this themselves, it's very difficult to build out that. First of all, the staffing to be able to do your own SOC. Deploying a SIEM solution is relatively straightforward, but the staffing to understand it and make context of what's been seen. And then we have, I suppose, years of experience in developing rules and analytics that are tailored and can be tailored to make sense. So that is a service. It's available and scales down from organizations from literally 50 to 100 people up to large enterprises, and we have some clients with over 20,000 users and clients down to about 50 to 60 users. So that's what we wanted to cover today. I think there might be a few questions that Paige may have for us. I think if so, Paige, we can answer those.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks, Paul. Thanks, Brendan. It was really interesting. We have got a couple of questions. So, Brendan, I'm going to come to you first with this one. Do you offer training sessions to organizations?
Yes, so there's multiple different types of training we can do. We can run through a ransomware very specific training, whether it be for end user training or whether it be for your IT teams to make sure that they understand the threats, they understand what happens. So go through this basically in more detail. Or we can also offer board, so we can do that to your IT team. Or we can do end user security awareness, just general end user security awareness. We could also do an incident response. So we work through an actual incident with your board or with the senior management or with your IT team or groups of teams, and we run through what would actually happen when the incident happens. So yeah, it can be tailored to what it is that what are you trying to achieve? Who are you trying to address it to? Yeah, brilliant. So if you want to contact us, yes, absolutely, we can arrange that.
Yeah, definitely. Paul, did you have anything you wanted to add there?
No, I think Brendan's hit the nail on the head there. It's anything from user awareness training to I suppose a step through training on your environment to help uncover what could be happening and how we could mitigate that. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, brilliant. Another one here, then I'll come to you again, Brendan. Where is your SOC located?
So Paul has in his background there a picture of, there's nobody at the desk there in the background picture, but the actual SOC is located in City West in Dublin. It is 24/7 staffed, so we always have somebody looking at screens. Then our actual infrastructure behind that SOC is located in Equinix data centers across 2 different Equinix data centers, both of them in Dublin, but everything is based out of Ireland.
Brilliant. Paul, I'll come to you with this one. If you detect an issue, what can you do?
Yeah, I think I kind of mentioned that a second ago. So that's the respond part, and the respond part can be anything from just giving you guided remediation advice to say, we suggest that we've seen this happening, we suggest you do this, isolate these machines or these networks, whatever it happens to be, depending on the level of engagement. And if we have a managed NOC service as well as a SOC service where, say, we're managing either endpoints or your firewall estate, whatever it happens to be, and this is kind of common, then we would have the ability to respond in terms of we've seen something happening, we're going to isolate that machine from the network, or we're going to isolate that network from the rest of the environment, or we're going to isolate, say, all internet traffic apart from, so critical traffic needs to get through. So that level of engagement really can go as deep as needs be.
Brilliant. Got time for one more. So you mentioned red team and blue team. I've heard of purple team. Where does that fit in?
Yeah, that's a good question, and it's funny when I look at the last slide here. It's kind of sliding between red and blue, so a bit of purple in the middle. So that's really a good page. How you've set that up. Yeah, in a way it kind of relates to the training piece. So red and blue teams, from our perspective, really are the red team are. They're not external threat actors. They're kind of the activities that a threat actor might do, or if we're doing a test, we would have red team. So if we're doing penetration tests, we basically call our penetration testing team a red team, and then we will call our SOC and our NOC our blue team, because they are the defenders. Where purple team comes into is so previously what you might have done is and people would have saved engages to do a penetration test, and we would have done a penetration test and produce a report, and that would have been fine. And then the report would have gone back into the organization. They would have looked and said, well, you missed this or you missed that, and it can be quite adversarial. In order to gain, I suppose, maximum value from those exercises, what a purple team exercise means is the red team attackers and the blue team defenders are kind of working together as one team. So both sides will understand what the what the attack is, and work through various scenarios, and then see how do we miss that, or how do we not block that, and then we'll be able to feed back in and say, okay, your NOC wasn't able to do this, or your SOC wasn't able to do that, and that's a kind of really useful engagement and exercise that we found for people who want to get that level of maturity, that purple team exercise. Yeah, so that's where it fits in, Paige.
Yeah, and if I can add to that, maybe as we focused a lot here on trying to stop the attacker or slow them down, but you do have to consider when they get by it, and that's where our detected dwell time, say, of 5 weeks might be a typical dwell time, and pretty similar for HSE, or maybe even a little bit longer for HSE. But where your purple team, we know, say, what was happening, like UAC bypass would be very common. A very common attack that somebody would use. So we know that now from our blue team. So our purple team, we say, okay, if we see a UAC bypass, we really have to pay attention to it, or a user added to the domain admin group, or a correlation, as Paul said, a correlation of events. If this is followed by this, we know. So maybe that's adding a bit more to the purple team there as well.
Brilliant.
Learning from what they do combined with the
Brilliant.
defense.
Okay, thanks, Paul. Thanks, Brendan. Okay, so we don't want to take up too much more of your time, so we'll end today's session there. Thank you again to our speakers and to all of those that attended today. Just a reminder that you'll be sent a recording tomorrow morning, so keep an eye out for that, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you. Bye.
Thanks all.
Thank you. Bye-bye.